You ever get so mad about something that you're thinking about it years later? So you do your senior thesis on it, and then you're still thinking about it. You can't get it out of your head. The brain worms are in there. So you make a video screaming into the void about it. That's how I feel about this book. Hi, Alexi here. Welcome to my channel where I scream into the void and expect no views, but do feel catharsis. Anyways, I'm really interested in straight fan fiction that then gets published as original work. I'm particularly interested in straight fan fiction that involves a male main character who originally was the villain and is Nazi coded, which is a lot more prevalent than one would think. I have, because of my senior research project, read a lot of Reylo fan fiction. Um, I won't really be technically citing the fan fiction here. I'll get into that in a second. Am I what one would classically call an anti when it comes to Reylo? No. Do I ship it? No. Well, I will be looking at the Love Hypothesis with my Reylo glasses on. Um, I won't be discussing specific fanfics, including the fic that it originally was published as, Head Over Feet. You might be like, Alexi, why? What's the point of that? Unfortunately, I have learned about fandom studies and I have learned about morals in fandom studies. So here's the thing. The convention for talking about fan fiction is to get author consent to talk about that fan fiction. You don't necessarily need fan fiction author permission to write a paper where you're discussing racism in the fan fiction or in the fandom specifically. However, as you might have noticed, this is not an academic paper. So I am going to try my best to talk about this Reylo novel without getting into specific fan fictions. Okay, so if you're blessedly offline, you might be like, Lexi, what is Reylo? What is a reskinned fan fiction? What are you talking about? If you do know what I'm talking about, go touch grass. A reskinned novel is another way of saying a fan fiction where the serial numbers were filed off. Or you might also hear me say a pulled to publish fan fiction, right? So basically, what it is an author decided that what they wanted to do was take their fan fiction, right? And change some of the names, change maybe some of the events or the character traits, which is called filing off the serial numbers, and then publish it as an original novel. Usually they take down the fic. Sometimes they maybe don't if it's self-published, but if then the book gets picked up by a major publisher, usually it's part of their contract. This really got popularized through 50 Shades of Grey, which was originally a Twilight fan fiction called Master of the Universe. The author E.L. James had the good sense to have some shame about publishing a weird Twilight fan fiction that eroticized Mormon virginity. And when it came out that 50 Shades was originally Twilight fan fiction, it was actually sort of a scandal. But it did make the book more popular because there was kind of this like forbidden element of it. Partially because I think fan fiction is still seen as something that's like dirty and inherently smutty, which is like not necessarily the case. No shame if it is for you, though. Anyways, because E.L. James saw this success, a bunch of other Twilight fic authors started publishing their own works, which then led to an influx of other fandoms doing something similar, particularly people who shipped Rey and Kylo Ren from the Star Wars sequel trilogy that's shortened to Reylo. if you didn't get that yet. And one of the first people to publish their fan fiction was Ali Hazelwood. Originally, it was called Head Over Feet. Now, the people in this cover might look a little familiar to you, okay? Yeah, that's right. That's Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver. Now let's get to the sequel movies, which are most important to us, all right? So we've got our main characters, Ray, played by Daisy Ridley. And then we've got Poe Dameron up here, who's played by Oscar Isaac, also a beautiful man. And then we've got Finn, played by John Boyega. They're not boyfriends. We all thought they would be, but they're not. Okay, keep that in your brain. And then Rose Tico, played by the incredible, talented, and also gorgeous Kelly Marie Tran. These two, Finn and Rose, they kiss in the movies, but then that's kind of like retconned out by the third movie. And then for our villains, we got Snoke, Commander Snoke. He's the like big bad guy in the first and second movie who's controlling everything. And then we've got his right-hand men, Kylo Ren, FKA Ben Solo, and Commander Hux. And at the end of the second movie, Kylo Ren kills Snoke and becomes the supreme leader of the evil people. Okay? The First Order, they're called. Now let's talk about the Reylos. When the first movie, The Force Awakens, which was pretty good in my opinion, came out, Reylos clowned on. People, more often than not, did not ship these two, okay? In fact, the main ship was between Kylo Ren and Commander Hux over here, Redhead White Boy of the Week. This is pretty in line with like fandom history and trends. You can trace it back to sort of Kirk and Spock from Star Trek fanworks. I think that's where a lot of fan culture as we know it today started because there were so many white male characters in media that became the norm. But now, as media diversifies, it still tends to be the white cis male characters that are foregrounded. Angie Fazekis has a really great essay about this in Fandom Now in Color, which is one of the main books I read for this project. So there is a lot of discourse, including like literal articles in pretty big entertainment space magazines being written about Kylo Ren and Rey. Specifically, one of the main criticisms is in The Force Awakens, Kylo Ren like scrapes her mind essentially to find information using the Force, I guess, after he captures her. And J.J. Abrams specifically called this scene a mind rape, which is not great. So then The Last Jedi comes out, which is the second in the sequel trilogy. And Snoke over here establishes a mind link between Kylo Ren and Rey. So they basically can like psychically see each other. Again, it's like using the Force and they can interact with each other's environments sometimes even. Also, they're like a dyad in the Force, so like I don't know, they're like equally powerful together. I still am not super clear on what that means, and I just rewatched both The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. So suddenly they're interacting a lot more, and people, I guess, are seeing the chemistry. I still didn't. I thought they were going to be like cousins or something. We'd really been traumatized by the Luke Leia situation. The popularity of Reylo exploded. People started writing a lot of fan fiction. A lot of it was focusing on like Kylo Ren would be like, Rey, come to the dark side. And Rey would be like, no, come to the light side. And it was sort of writing this like seduction of Rey, I think was a lot of it. It was also a very annoying time if you shipped Storm Pilot and did not ship Reylo because you had to filter out like so many tags with all of their nicknames just to get these two. Like speaking of foregrounding white characters, okay? Rise of Skywalker. Kylo Ren and Rey team up to kill Palpatine, who it turns out is Rey's grandfather. They team up because Kylo Ren is like, "No, you're trying to kill Rey. You can't do that." And he like has turned to the light side, okay? They team up, they kill Palpatine together, something something diet in the Force, something something. Rey dies because of this. But then Kylo Ren, who's now Ben Solo, I guess, kisses her, which transfers his life force to her, which somehow brings her back to life. But then he dies. So the Reylos are like, we won! Reylo popularity explodes. Um, Everybody is super, super into it. This one girly writes a very popular fan fiction called Head Over Feet. It's a grad school AU. AU is alternate universe, by the way. A lot of the Star Wars fan fiction, and particularly Reylo fan fiction, exists in alternate universes because then they don't have to contend with Kylo Ren being a genocidal maniac. This girly gets contacted by a publisher and is like, hey, do you want to like file off the serial numbers of your really popular fan fiction and publish it? And then it gets published as The Love Hypothesis. Girly uses the name Allie Hazelwood because she is in academia and she doesn't want to use her real name. Here's the thing, though. Here's what really is grinding my gears, okay? A lot of people in this fandom, especially Reylo shippers, are making some really weird choices in their fan works, both when it comes to race and when it comes to gender. That also creeps out into the real world when they harass actors of color that they see as coming between their ship, particularly John Boyega. We'll talk more about that later. All of these issues that I've observed personally within the Reylo fandom, and I'm, by the way, not original, like much better scholars than me have observed these issues, they do come up to some extent in the Love Hypothesis. And as we're seeing more and more works where the serial numbers are being filed off,
I'm specifically thinking of Dramione.
this sort of becomes more and more prescient. And I thought maybe if I make a video, at least these people will leave my mind, okay? So, the Love Hypothesis follows Stanford grad student Olive. Olive briefly dated this guy, Jeremy, but Olive's friend On so Olive's friend On has a crush on Jeremy. Now, Olive and Jeremy only went on a couple of dates, okay? And she didn't even like him that much. She thought he was kind of boring, whatever. But On, she doesn't want to break girl code. So she's like, no, I won't go out with Jeremy. And Olive is like, God, how can I get her to do this? How can I get her to, like, listen to me and what I'm saying and that it's okay? I can say that I am dating someone. She'll think I am over Jeremy, and then she'll go and date him, and like, I'll just pretend we break up after a couple weeks. It's like fine, whatever. So she's like, okay, yeah, guess what? I'm on a date tonight. Instead, she's like studying in the bio hall or whatever. I don't know. I only go to Stanford for like medical appointments, so I don't know what y'all students do there. She's supposed to be on a date, right? But she hears On walking down the halls, and she's like, oh my God, On is gonna know I'm lying. So what does her smart ass do? She decides to kiss the first man she sees, not realizing that it is Professor Adam Carlson. Now you might be like, you mean Professor Adam Driver? No, Adam Carlson, who's like the department hardness. Okay, that's their words. Not mine. Okay, he's mean. He fails people for no reason, allegedly. He makes people cry, not allegedly. So yeah, she's kissed him. Okay, and On is like, oh. what are you doing? And Adam was like, we're kissing. What do you mean? What are we doing? So anyways, now On thinks that Olive and Adam are dating. Adam jokes that he is going to report her, Olive, to Title IX because she did kiss him without his consent. She thought that he said yes, but he was like, no, I actually didn't. She's very apologetic, as she should be. And he's like, no, like, I was just kidding. I was just kidding. But, like, so you need to fake date somebody. So on over here will go on dates with Jeremy over here. And Olive is like, yeah, basically that's the situation. So Bestie Adam is like, okay, Stanford is threatening to freeze my funding. Like they think that I haven't settled down enough, so I'm gonna like randomly leave, right? So, it would be great if it looked like I was dating somebody until I can like get my funding, which is in like November or something. I don't know. Whatever. It's like they would have to fake date for a couple of months. And Olive is like, okay, sounds great. But won't this be a problem department-wise? Like, is this allowed at Stanford? And Adam is like, yeah, it's like fine because I'm not actually your prof, but I'll have to check. Which, if it wasn't fine, this wouldn't be a book. They fake date, whatever. Here's the thing. It took me exactly 5 seconds to find Stanford's policy when it comes to profs dating grad students specifically. So, Stanford categorizes grad students as students, and their policy is that profs, no matter their department, cannot date grad students. Let me read this, okay? Second, whenever a teacher has had or in the future might reasonably be expected to have academic responsibility over any student, such relationships are prohibited. This includes, for example, any faculty member who teaches in the graduate students department, program, or division. Now, Adam Carlson, though he doesn't directly teach Olive, he is in Olive's department. I found this in 5 seconds and it was published in 2017. And this is where I'm confused. I'm like, Ali Hazelwood, why wouldn't you just set it at some nebulous university so that you didn't have to deal with Stanford's strict policies? But I don't know. I don't. On tells her new boyfriend Jeremy that Olive and Adam are dating. And Jeremy, instead of being discreet about it, goes and tells the whole school. And you know who's mad about that? Is no. You know who's mad about that is Olive's roommate, Malcolm. When Adam forced Malcolm to throw out tons of data and redo half his study, it made for a very, very miserable few months. In retrospect, that might have been when Malcolm started wishing a plague on the Carlson house. He had been rehearsing for Romeo and Juliet at the time. So basically, Malcolm is mad at Olive because, where is he? Adam really messed up his life. And he is mad that Olive is dating like his mortal enemy, basically, of a prof. But then Olive is like, chillax, Malcolm. We are fake dating. It's fine. And Malcolm's like, what? So, anyways, Malcolm comes around. He's like, I guess that's like more acceptable than if you guys are really dating. I don't know, whatever. So then, to make things look convincing, Olive and Adam go on weekly, like Wednesday coffee dates to Starbucks, which, like, you couldn't make up a cute little coffee shop. You had to choose Starbucks. I don't know, maybe I'm just a hater. This is a complete side note, but on one of these dates, we learn that Adam is Jewish, but he likes plain bagels and cream cheese. Now, I myself am Jewish. And I will say, I do like the occasional plain bagel and cream cheese. However, I do not know a single Jew who would admit to it being their favorite bagel. It's not that, like, my family would disown me. If I said that my favorite bagel is plain bagel with plain cream cheese, however, they would make fun of me mercilessly. Olive and Adam have to convince people that they're dating. On keeps being like, you guys should show each other physical affection. And they're like, no, we don't want to. And On is like, no, guys, you're dating, right? Because remember, Malcolm is the only one that knows that they're fake dating. Adam and Olive have a heart to heart. We found out that her mother died of pancreatic cancer when she was in high school, which is part of why she wants to go into the sciences. She specifically wants to go into cancer research. She's like applying to basically like PhD school. I don't know what that's called. One of the only people that's responding to her emails that like is in the field that she wants to be in is this guy, Tom. Now, Tom worked with Adam and Adam's other friend, Holden. They all worked in the same lab as their like post-grad degree, right? And Tom would sort of like act as a buffer between the head of their lab, who I guess was originally Snoke. Holden does not trust Tom. He's like, it's fishy that somehow, whenever Tom witnessed something go wrong, immediately not Snoke figured it out and like was blaming Adam, but Tom could go play the hero. Oh no, guys, calm down. Everything's okay. Part of how we know, by the way, that Tom is a red flag is because all of his emails have the sent from my iPhone tag. That is real easy to turn off, okay? The gang all go to a conference where Olive is going to be presenting some of her research. Adam can't go because he's giving some like opening remarks. I don't know, whatever. There's some confusion where On and Malcolm figure that Olive is going to be staying with Adam, so they end up staying together. There's not only one bed, much to everybody's surprise. And then I think they end up having sex, but Olive is still like, no, he doesn't like me like that. Like, no, he doesn't. And also, the deadline's coming up soon, anyways. And Adam thinks that Olive doesn't like him romantically because at one point she said that she didn't because she was like freaking out or something. Olive is really nervous about her presentation, but it goes great. Um, and then everybody leaves. Tom comes up to her afterwards and is like sexually harassing her and is like, you didn't think that you got into my lab because you're good, did you? No, it's because I think you're pretty. But also, I want to steal all of your data. So, like, is she talented or is she not? Tom. God, I hate him. So Olive comes back to the room really shaken. Adam is like, what's wrong? And Olive doesn't want to tell him that it was Tom specifically who sexually harassed her. So she just says she overheard people saying her talk was stupid. Adam is like, I'm sure it wasn't. And then I'm pretty sure they have sex again. Whatever. The next morning, On and Malcolm have sent hella texts, okay? They thought Olive was dead because she didn't respond, which is so real. Anyways, they were sending hella texts because Malcolm and Holden hooked up. Now, Malcolm has had a crush on Holden for like a while, okay? Anyways, they're going on a date later, whatever. Um, but then they're like, "Oh, Olive, why are you upset?" And she's like, "Tom sexually harassed me, but I don't know like how to tell Adam, but of course I'm gonna report it," which is awesome. Girl boss. And then it turns out because she was recording her talk for like her advisor or somebody, she caught everything that Tom said. She recorded all of it. Olive goes to a restaurant and plays the recording for like all of the profs to hear. Adam punches Tom and is like, don't ever talk to the woman I love like that again. Tom is actually going to face consequences. Adam and Olive confess their feelings to each other. I think they probably have sex again. I don't remember. I got a lot of my sources just generally when talking about Reylo from Eli Evil Eye, who actually read all of the Reylo books. Lot stronger than me there, Eli. They talk about this book, Dangerous Men and Adventurous Women, a few times, which then I read it. It's a compilation of essays that women wrote on like romance as a genre. In the intro to the book, editor Jane Ann Krentz writes that the romance novel is based on fantasies and that the readers are no more confused about this fact nor any more likely to use their reading as a substitute for action in the real world than readers of, and then she like names some famous authors. Is this book overall my favorite? No. Do I think its gender politics are weird? Yeah. Am I saying if you read this book, you support this kind of relationship in which in real life a prof is probably taking advantage of a grad student? No, I'm not saying that. I think that people can tell the difference between this happening in real life, which would just be morally wrong, and this happening in a book. Readers aren't stupid. That being said, let's talk about the fact that this is an age gap romance. Adam is a prof, Olive is a student. Therefore, they do have an age gap. It's actually an 8-year age gap, which Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver have a 9-year age gap in real life. A lot of the Reylo works I read either like exaggerated this age gap into 10 years, kept it as 9 years, or like kept it around that area. I think one of them that I read like made it 5 years. So the age gap comes up, especially in AU works. Olive doesn't actually think about how much their age gap would affect their relationship, both as a like societal appearance and also like they are at different places in their life. But she doesn't think about it that much. Like, at one point, she does say his grads interacted with him every day, believing that he, Adam, was dating one of their peers. Did they think him lecherous? Had his relationship with Olive changed their perception of him? And what about other faculty members in the department or in adjacent programs? Just because dating a grad student was allowed, it didn't mean that it wasn't frowned upon. They also do at one point talk about their specific ages. Olive says something that's like, it's so weird to hear a specific number. She's also 25, which, you know, I'm a recent college grad. I'm not a grad student, and I pray to God I never will be. So I did have to Google it. And like for her point in grad school, that like is pretty normal. However, I have a conspiracy theory. When people are talking about age gap relationships, they often like have this cutoff of like, well, when you're 25, your brain is fully developed, so like it's fine to be in an age gap relationship. That's a myth. I just find it interesting though that like Olive is just over the age of like being able to be in an age gap relationship. That's just my conspiracy theory. What I will say though is Olive's peers and friends and like cohort, they're not like really concerned about this age gap that's happening here, okay? They're actually mad at Olive. This whole situation where Olive's peers are mad at her because of their relationship kind of culminates when Adam is super pissy and then forces a student to completely revise his proposal and like add another control group, which means this project is going to be 10 times more consuming. It's a side character. He's like not on this board, but whatever. Olive scratched her temple, trying not to sigh. It sucks, I'm sorry, she repeated once more, at a loss for anything better and genuinely feeling for Greg. Yeah, well, he stood up and walked around his bench, coming to stop in front of Olive. You should be. She froze. Surely she must have misheard. Excuse me? You're his girlfriend. I, italics, really am not. But even if she had been, Greg, I'm only dating him. I'm not him. How would I have anything to do with? You're fine with all this, with him acting like that, like an asshole on a power trip. You don't give a shit about the way he treats everyone in the program. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to stomach being with him. She's like, I'm not the one who failed you, Greg. And he's like, maybe, but you don't care that half of the department lives in terror of your boyfriend either. Olive felt anger bubbling up. That is not true. I am able to separate my professional relationships and my personal feelings for him because you don't give a shit about anyone but yourself. Anyways, y'all, I have a serious question. Am I a bad person for agreeing with Greg? I just like don't think I could date somebody who treats everyone around me like shit. Like at one point she literally thinks about him, I can't figure out why he's so different with me. That's because he wants something from you, girl. Like he wants you to love him back. Olive's fake relationship with Adam is causing her very real social life to suffer. So then she and Adam get in like an argument over text about the whole situation. She tells him to fuck off or something. I don't know. It's actually really tame and she's a lot more mature than I would be, but like I wouldn't be in this situation because I would not be dating him. Adam's reaction when they like have a heart to heart afterwards is, I'm not sorry for asking Greg to revise his proposal, but I am sorry that I created a situation that led him to take it out on you. That as long as this continues, it might happen again. Well, I am sorry about the texts I sent, she, Olive, said again. And you're fine, even if you're antagonistic and unapproachable. Good to hear. So to summarize, Adam is basically like, yeah, I'm gonna keep being a bitch to your peers and it's gonna ruin your social life. Sorry about that. And then she apologizes to him. As far as I understand it, he only interacts with grad students that way. Like, we see his interactions with Holden and, of course, Tom pre the argument, and he's perfectly cordial to them. He's only making people who are directly his inferiors cry. To me, Adam comes across not as sort of a like hard to get, emotionally closed off man that Olive is gonna get to like tame. But instead, he comes across as a bully who is a dick to people when he knows he can get away with it. Like, literally, there is an example of this change not just with Olive. Once Holden and Malcolm start dating, suddenly he's a lot nicer to Malcolm because he knows it'll piss Holden off and he can't bully him anymore because he's been elevated to the same status essentially as Olive through his connection to Holden. This is my problem with the Kylo Ren slash Ben and all avatars of him characters, like, you know, in this situation, Adam. It's that Reylos act like he's misunderstood, and him teaming up with Rey in The Rise of Skywalker to defeat Palpatine ultimately makes him good. He like is following a redemption arc like his grandfather Darth Vader, right? But the thing is, he is not turning on Palpatine in the First Order or whatever to be good. He is doing it because he's obsessed with Rey and they want to kill her. All of these versions of Kylo Ren in the view of Reylos become good when that's not actually the case. They don't do it because they want to be better morally, or maybe because they regret blowing up planets or, I don't know, failing Greg. They do it because they want to be with Olive. This all leads into my main frustration when it comes to Reylos, which is how they treat race. So I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm white. I am basing my opinions and what I'm talking about in this video in the work of authors of color who are looking at this fandom, particularly Stitch, who is a fandom studies scholar and writer for Teen Vogue, who is Black and has done a lot of work within the subject of Reylos and anti-Blackness in the Star Wars fandom, especially the Star Wars sequel fandom. So if you want something that's actually in depth and from somebody that has ended up having to basically live and breathe this and also faced harassment from Reylos because they've been so outspoken, you can find Stitch at Stitch's Media Mix, I believe is her blog. And then they also have a podcast, which hasn't been updated in a while, but is amazing. All that to say, I am white, even if I'm basing my conclusions in what scholars of color are saying, likely there are going to be times when I mess up because as a white person, I'm always learning. However, I think it would be a really great disservice and it would actually be racism through omission if I did not talk about how the Reylo fandom and Reylo works, like the Love Hypothesis, get things wrong. If we're going to talk about Reylos, we're going to have to talk about their treatment of John Boyega. In one of their blog posts, Stitch writes, "Generally, I don't trust people in the Star Wars fandom who are willing to wax poetic about how Kylo Ren, who they usually call by his pre-First Order name Ben Solo, somehow deserves redemption. These fans usually, one, think that this Ben Solo is the sequel trilogy's real hero, two, believe that not wanting redemption for a fictional fascist is a moral failure, three, go above and beyond to diminish both Finn and his performer, John Boyega." So basically, one of the main incidents that occurred happened because in early 2020, John Boyega responded to a tweet which said, "My boy after realizing Kylo died so he can date Rey," and it was like a gif of Finn, I guess. And then John Boyega like responded to the tweet, "It's not who she, Rey, kisses, but who eventually lays the pipe. You are a genius." It's just like a funny joke. It's a funny response, right? I like the "you are a genius." Like, honestly, low key, it's the humor that I find funny. I am not a very sophisticated person, I would say. However, the Reylos, they were not happy. So the Reylos were acting like Daisy Ridley, who is a white woman, was somehow threatened by John Boyega because he made this like pretty mild joke about her character. In a 2020 podcast episode, Stitch pointed out that people were tweeting at John Boyega, like, "You make me uncomfortable as a woman." But these same people often had very not safe for work usernames that were like talking about Rey, like Rey's a hoe or whatever. John Boyega is funny as fuck. So he posted a four-panel tweet of Rey and Kylo Ren's canonical interactions, basically lightly roasting all of these people who were being awful towards him and calling for him to be fired, death threats. We should cancel him. Like, horribly racist to him.
Hi, editing Alexi here. I recently found that he also made a Instagram compilation video of him reacting to harassy Reylo tweets, and these are some of my favorite clips that I'm playing here.
Stitch says, "We actually see a lot of it across the coming days following the first, where people were like worried about Daisy's safety. They were going to frame this as John Boyega out of nowhere attacking these poor, innocent women who just wanted to ship their ship. Never mind that these women had spent hours and hundreds, if not thousands, of tweets insulting him either directly or via indirects. Y'all, you know, never mind that." Eli Evil Eye in their video about Reylo books also talked about how racism was pretty prevalent in Reylo fanfiction as well. Specifically, there was sort of an infamous Beauty and the Beast AU fic, specifically the Disney version, in which Finn was cast as Gaston, who's like basically the villain in Beauty and the Beast if you haven't seen it. And like his characterization in the fic falls into a lot of really harmful and obviously untrue stereotypes about Black men. All that to say, the Star Wars fandom, and I think in particular Reylos, have been atrocious to John Boyega. And I think this is partially because they see his character as a threat to like Ben and Rey's relationship, right? Um, it's also partially because they want to protect their white female main character from a black male character that they see as a threat. And like, this is something that bothered me throughout my whole original project, but there's something weird and racist about so many people bending over backwards to ship Rey with a Nazi coded character, rather than see her be with a black man. Because what I've talked about is Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, Adam Carlson, whatever you want to call him, whatever version of him, doesn't actually turn good. He just lets his obsession with Rey outweigh him being a villain. And Reylos tend to use that as justification that maybe he was good the whole time, for example, or that he's completely redeemed. But there's just something so interesting to me that they're really into talking about that, but can't imagine Rey with like a very sweet guy who was good the whole time and just so happens to be played by a black actor. Also, before somebody comes at me and is like, well, Adam Driver isn't like just white, and most of his characterizations aren't just white, like he's Jewish, and in a lot of these works he's Jewish. No, he's not. I looked it up. Adam Driver, plain white man. White bread. Also, like, this is a complete side note, right? But there is also something really weird there that to, like, distance your Kylo Ren character in AUs, these Reylos are, like, making him Jewish. Like, I think that's also a little weird and offensive. I'm bringing this up because it is really important context with when we talk about Malcolm and race in the Love Hypothesis. So something that's really interesting to me in the Love Hypothesis is that An's identity as a Vietnamese woman is actually talked about a fair amount. An is obviously originally Rose, who's played by Kelly Marie Tran, who is a Vietnamese woman. However, Malcolm's race slash ethnicity is just not talked about at all. Like, if you're aware that this used to be a Reylo fic, or if you were reading it as the original fic, you know that Malcolm is supposed to be Finn, is supposed to be John Boyega, so of course he's black. There's this sort of fandom agreed upon image of him. However, I actually do know multiple people who didn't know that the Love Hypothesis was originally fan fiction. So, how are they supposed to know that Malcolm is specifically black? Well, let me tell you. So, at one point in the novel, about halfway through actually, Olive has realized that she does like Adam Carlson romantically, and she's talking to Malcolm about it, and she's kind of freaking out. She squeezed her eyes shut and whimpered, "He's really not that sullen." Malcolm responded, "Oh, he is. Just you don't notice because you're halfway gone for him." "I am not." She smacked her forehead repeatedly. "Shit." He leaned forward and grabbed her hand, his skin dark and warm against hers. "Hey," he told her, voice pitched to a comforting tone. "Settle down. We'll figure it out." What does dark and warm mean? Obviously, it's better than, comparing your black character's skin to food. However, what does dark and warm mean? Basically, what I think this comes from is a lot of us white people, especially white people who are authors, which I'm not, but this is my understanding, have this issue where we really want to avoid offending people when writing non-white characters, particularly black characters. Now, this could come from like a genuinely good place of wanting to do the right thing. It could come from a place of not wanting to get canceled, or it could come from both. Here's the thing. What Ali Hazelwood is doing is actually also harmful. So in Fandom Now in Color, there's this Catherine Anderson Howell essay that cites Diana Shank talking about racism existing in unexplored gaps. Shank is talking about reading lists in higher ed classes, and she talks about profs excusing themselves from continuing an active exploration of race and whiteness. I am speaking from the perspective of somebody who is an American and grew up in America. Um, from that perspective, I think a lot of us are trained by the media we consume to assume whiteness as the default. When your allusions to your character being black are blink and you miss it, and also don't even actually specify that he is black, like, is that real representation or is that an unexplored gap? We've talked about Finn being perceived as a threat to Reylo, at least subconsciously, because, I don't know, men and women can't be friends or whatever, and this belief that black men are inherently a threat to white women, which obviously is not true. And we've seen how Reylos treat John Boyega because of this. So, in the Love Hypothesis, how do we know that he is not a threat to Reylo, I mean Olive and Adam? Would that be like Olim? Adiliv? God. Here are some other thoughts I have, okay? Um, we know that Malcolm treats dating like an Olympic sport. We do also know that he is bisexual because he talks a lot about having a crush on Holden. We also know that he is very close to Olive. He even has a nickname for her, Kalamata, which, honestly made me hungry. I freaking love Kalamata olives. Pretend I'm talking about that hot fish from Finding Nemo and hear me out for a sec, okay? The idea of taming a very active man is a really well-known trope in romance. Dangerous Men, Adventurous Women does talk about that. But in those sorts of stories, the male love interest is usually really mean to the female love interest at first. Like, she has to earn his trust almost, and like earn him not seeing her as a potential sex object. Um, and then now that he respects her, he sees her as, somebody he could potentially engage with sexually as an equal. But Malcolm is too nice, so we can't fit into that trope. We do know that he is bi and active, but we only ever hear him talking about Holden, which makes it, seem like by the rules of romance, they're gonna end up together. So he's not a threat to Olive because he's clearly into this man. And here's the thing, there have been a couple of studies done. One was pretty recent, actually, that did show that straight women do tend to see bisexual men as less desirable and less masculine. So we can assume that probably a fair amount of Ali Hazelwood's readership would feel that as well. Because of that, that would further make Malcolm not a threat. Now, do I personally believe this? No. Also, again, this is kind of an aside, but like, it's a little bit messed up that Ali Hazelwood wrote Malcolm to be a black man who is also bisexual and falls into the stereotypes of dating around a lot and being like sexually prolific. That's a little messed up too! I think if there's anything I do want you to take away from this video, even if I did get everything about Finn and Malcolm and John Boyega wrong, what I do want anybody watching this to take away is that it's pretty messed up that the Reylo fandom finds it almost inconceivable that Rey, a white woman, could date a man who is nice and just so happens to be black. I don't know. They just bend over backwards to pair her with this Nazi-coded character. And it's just like exhausting to read. And I just think it's like so interesting to me that, even if in the Love Hypothesis he's not, a space fascist, he's still a dick. Y'all, I'm so sorry. I just got very, very warm, so we've had an outfit change because I was wearing a fuzzy tank top and I felt like I could not. So, you know how I was talking about The Reylos being racist towards John Boyega. You know who everybody was racist towards? Kelly Marie Tran. Kelly Marie Tran's character Rose Tico first came about in The Last Jedi, and it was really her breakout role in a lot of ways. And the Star Wars fandom, just like as a whole, especially the old guard white men, could barely handle a white woman being in the main cast. So do you think they had calmed down now that a woman of color was there? So Kelly Marie Tran is harassed basically nonstop post The Last Jedi. The Wikipedia entry on Rose is edited to be full of racist and hateful slurs. And I think it's real interesting that the Reylos suddenly started really defending Kelly Marie Tran when they thought that John Boyega was calling her weak for deleting her Instagram. Like, where were you guys when she was being raked over the coals on your corner of the internet? Thankfully, Disney actually had a really great solution for everybody harassing Kelly Marie Tran. And that solution was basically writing her out of The Rise of Skywalker. And I remember in like 2018 walking out of the theaters and like really thinking, I feel like they wrote Rose out of the movie. I feel like she was barely in it. And the other night I was like, you know what, for research, I should probably rewatch the movie. I invited a friend over because I didn't want to do it alone. Uh, I did do it sober though. You know what? I was not wrong. 2018 me was correct. There were so many times in that movie where things would have just gone so much quicker if they had a freaking mechanic around. These three over here were like gallivanting along around the galaxy, constantly being like, I wonder how we fix this ship we stole. I wonder how we fix the Millennium Falcon. Y'all could have done it in 2 seconds if you'd brought Rose along. Y'all may recall that Olive's best friends are Malcolm and An, aka Finn and Rose. And Malcolm knows from the beginning that Olive and Adam's relationship is fake. An, however, does not. So, how do you think An reacts when Olive finally comes clean? Do you think she's upset? Do you think she says, well, thank you for telling me, but it is like really hurtful that you told Malcolm and not me. I appreciate that you were trying to do a nice thing, blah, 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 blah. No. She apologizes to Olive. Basically, Malcolm is actually the one that tells Rose, and he like summarizes all the details for her while Olive is there, which he unfortunately can do because Olive will not stop talking to him about her plain bagel, plain cream cheese boyfriend. Olive said, listen, I'm sorry I lied. Please don't hate me. I don't hate you. Oh, you don't? Of course not. An was indignant. I low-key hate myself for forcing you to do all that stuff. Well, maybe not hate, but I'd write myself a strongly worded email. And I'm incredibly flattered that you'd do something like that for me. While Olive was, however misguidedly, trying to do something really nice for An, she did lie to one of her best friends about something like really important. And she does owe her an apology for that. However, the scene ends up being An saying that she hates herself for forcing Olive into these situations and expressing gratitude to Olive. And I feel crazy for thinking that's weird. To zoom out, right? All of this is happening while Malcolm and An are comforting Olive after the aftermath of Tom sexually harassing her. So basically, Hazelwood is writing An into this weird situation where she is an emotional caretaker to Olive, even in a situation where she has learned she has been wronged. And I'm just like, Miss Hazelwood, why did you have this all revealed in what is really written to be Olive's Dark Night of the Soul? Why are you having this sort of secret that was kept from Olive's best friend, who is an Asian woman, revealed at a moment that's really about the white female main character. Here's my other big problem with this book, okay? So after the scene where Rose apologizes to Olive, we just never hear from her again. Like, there's a few more chapters of this book, right? They're all about Olive and Adam and a little bit about Holden and Malcolm. Like, they go on a double date, for example. And, like, what's so confusing about this is it feels like Rose is almost being punished for not dating a prof. Like, of course, she can't go on their double dates because she's not in this club of dating a prof, which shouldn't be a freaking club. And, like, the other thing is the reason for this book having a plot at all is Rose. I mean, yeah, it's Olive being stupid and trying to get Rose to, accept that she can date White Boy of the Week Jeremy. The reason that Olive is able to have her fake dating romance with plain bagel and cream cheese Adam Carlson is because An wants to date White Boy of the Week Jeremy. Also, Jeremy's a redhead with no freckles. That feels so weird to me. And like once she's like, I guess served her purpose of getting Olive and Adam to fake date and then I guess eventually real date, she's just pushed aside. She's written out of the book in the same way she's written out of the frickin' movie. And of course, like this is a really common thing in other forms of media, so of course it's common in fandom and in Reylo, but this woman of color is like the impetus for Olive's story. And she can't even get a proper apology. I was watching Jess Owens's video recently. It's from a couple of years ago, but it is about the Love Hypothesis. And Jess does point out that a lot of On's personality does seem to be, of course, being pushy with Olive and Adam, but also organizing for BIPOC women in STEM, which, like, of course, I'm really glad that the book does touch on the intersectionality of race and gender discrimination in the STEM field. But like what Jess is pointing out is also important. Specifically, just says that On feels like a cardboard cutout, which I agree with. It feels like Hazelwood, who, is a white woman, wrote this character that was originally Rose to serve the purpose of discussing intersectional discrimination in STEM, to say she addressed it instead of engaging deeply. And also, it feels like Hazelwood wrote this to make Ray slash Olive look like a good person. Like, hear me out, okay? In so many of their conversations, Olive is like, hey, how did event for BIPOC women in STEM go? And On is like, it went really well. And Olive is like, that's amazing. You're amazing. And On is like, thanks. Now tell me about your salt and pepper or too spicy boyfriend. It sort of feels like Hazelwood is saying, okay, I've had Olive slash Ray ask about her POC friend's interest, which shows she's a good friend and a good person. Time to use that POC friend to move the story along between my two white leads. Like, that's weird. It's weird that Rose seems to exist in this story to move everything along for Ray slash Olive and Adam slash Kylo Ren slash Ben Solo. And then she's completely written out. And it's weird that that dynamic keeps getting published. The really messed up thing is that in an opinion piece that Kelly Marie Tran wrote for the New York Times after she did like leave the internet for her mental health, um, is the same society that taught some people they were heroes, saviors, inheritors of the manifest destiny ideal taught me I existed only in the backgrounds of their stories, doing their nails, diagnosing their illnesses, supporting their love interests, and perhaps the most damaging, waiting for them to rescue me. And like, here's my thing. A lot of these Reylo works are fix-its or alternate universes, right? They make it so Kylo Ren is alive in the Star Wars universe or it's set somewhere else, like, I don't know, a coffee shop or a university. And Rose, or the Rose character, is still in this same box of being the support to the love interests in Kelly Marie Tran's own words. And I'm just like, congrats. The most revolutionary thing about your not off serial number novel is that you didn't have the shame to hide that it was originally fan fiction, nor the balls to stand on that as your book got more and more famous. It should not be the case that when you originally used that this was fan fiction to sell the book, suddenly my friends don't know that was the case. So when I was researching this segment of my script, I actually found a pretty recent interview that had been written a little bit earlier this year, prior to the release of The Wedding Banquet, which Kelly Marie Tran does co-star in with, I think, Lily Gladstone. In the article, the author writes, a lot has changed for Tran since Star Wars, but as she looks back on her experience with the fandom, she knows that the racism she faced was symptomatic of a larger continuing issue. When considering what she wants to see change for actors of color who might not receive the support they need when they appear in major franchises, she replies, the world. And then this is quoting her. It's interesting how it seems to be happening pretty consistently to actors of color who find themselves in these spaces. And I think these occurrences are a microcosm for the social climate that we're living in, and it's really unfortunate. This microcosm, as Kelly Marie Tran talked about, exists in Star Wars, which also means it exists in fan fiction, which also means it exists in the fan fiction that is published as books. Generally, as a person, I'm pretty pro don't like, don't read in fandom spaces. So I personally don't really like Reylo, not something I'm going to be reading for fun. However, it is also something I don't really understand, which is why I chose to study it, and I then still didn't understand it, so then I decided to make this video and I still don't understand it. Anyways, I also do understand the fandom studies convention of not talking about the specific fan fiction if, for example, it was pulled down to be published because it was the author's wishes to, have it not in circulation anymore. However, I do think that a lot of these rules change when you are using the fact that your work used to be fan fiction, and even in some cases, keeping that fan fiction up as a way to market your book. So, speaking of using the fact that your book used to be fan fiction for marketing, the publishing industry has moved on from Reylo and has moved on to something that frankly pisses me off more. This is an actual graphic that a publishing house posted that explained Dramione and used it to market The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy, which was originally a Dramione fanfiction.
Hi, editing Alexi here again. It's come to my attention that the author of The Irresistible Urge claims it's not a Dramione fanfiction, but has a fanfiction up on AO3 that's the same name. So, I mean, I guess I'll read both at some point.
Um, the person that taught me a lot about fan studies also forwarded me an email that they got that was uh, basically Barnes and Noble sending out a newsletter about Alchemized, which will probably be published by the time I have this video edited and out, um, which is also formerly Dramione fanfiction, and specifically the newsletter talked about other Dramione inspired work. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. So specifically, actually, Alchemized was based on this very, very long fanfiction called Manacled, which was a alternate ending. What if the evil wizards had won the Wizarding War and then they decided to make it The Handmaid's Tale? Yeah, and my main problem with it was incredibly ableist. And as a disabled person, that made me real mad. I think I'll probably read the book, and then depending on how I feel after editing this video, if I like doing that, maybe I'll make another video. Another thing that I think is really interesting is I feel like the Love Hypothesis sort of clearly being Adam Driver and Daisley Ridley on the cover kind of gave other publishing houses, it almost feels like permission to do that. So we've got, for example, The Irresistible Urge. Pretty clearly, that's supposed to be Draco Malfoy over there. You can look up the original cover, and then the FMC is based off of Emma Watson, but does draw upon the agreed upon fanon image of Hermione Granger being a nebulous person of color, from my understanding. Another interesting example of this, I think, actually, is the upcoming Colby Wilkins book, If I Go Down with This Ship, which, like, God, you can't see it very well. I'm real mad about this because I was in this fandom. It's just Taika Waititi and Riz Darby on the cover, which also specifically, I actually would like to do more research into um, If I Go Down with the Ship, because I think Colby Wilkins was the author that had this whole scandal where they said they were Choctaw and Cherokee. I don't know their pronouns. And then it's possible that that might not be the case. And then they pitched a book that was like a time traveling native pirate romance a bit ago, and it seems like this is just a redone version of that. So I'm like not clear if it's heavily inspired by Our Flag Means Death, which is, by the way, what's being referenced on the cover. Um, or like actually was fan fiction. If it was actually fan fiction and somebody knows, like, hit me up. At the end of the day, I blame the Reylos for Dramione. Um, I have a lot of issues with the fact that a book used to be fan fiction being very explicitly used to market it, as I think it really flirts with where fan fiction exists legally when it comes to intellectual property. Um, because J.K. Rowling is J.K. Rowling, I would not be super surprised if she tries to sue one of these new Hermione authors. Um, I don't know if she'd win, but if that's what leads to Archive of Our Own getting shut down, I will be mad. Anyways, thanks for watching. Next time I see you, it'll probably be talking about this.
I need a